Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, 10 a.m., and that means that we're back with our weekly live Q&A with our Canadian immigration law firm, Holthe Immigration Law. Today it's Mark, Alicia, and I, and we're waiting for people to file in. So for those who join, let us know where you tuned in from. Give us a shout out. We'll give you a shout out. And then if you have any questions, we would gladly answer those questions as well. While we're waiting for people to leave their comments, how are you guys doing?
Oh, Alicia and I just finished recording a quick little podcast episode. We've had a little bit of a lull just with everything going on. And there's, it's a real state of turmoil, is the way I would describe immigration these days. And it's expanded to all aspects of immigration. So the podcast episode that we just recorded, which I think we're about 170 or something, Alicia, we'll try to release that later this week. But it was all on the changes to the labor market impact assessment process, the LMIAs, and how officers are treating these applications, how difficult they are. And it just sure seems like the government is trying to throw a wrench in every possible avenue we try to pursue to allow people to stay in a world where they're trying to get people out. And so obviously, if you're on an open work permit and your employer's in a region where they can actually submit the LMIA application, it just seems like all of these little hurdles are constantly being placed in the way of an employer trying to succeed in getting the LMIA approved. And one right now is the job bank, right, Alicia? It's become a real challenge.
Yeah,
So
it's tricky right now for employers. I've been getting more consults with employers who are trying to figure out, well, can I do this for my employee? My employee's asking me, can I give them a job offer through this stream? Can we do remote work? Does this qualify for a PNP? Can we look at maybe one of the rural initiatives? What's involved in that? Can we still get an LMIA? These are all questions that are cropping up often. And the other thing that I've been noticing from consults is that things are more and more complex. And so the more time that goes on and the more desperate people become because their work permits are running out and they have their PR application, but they can't lose their work permit status, especially if they're on employer driven stream, people are getting pretty panicked, and sometimes they're misrepresenting or they're acting in a way that's inconsistent with what they've first said. Or I've been seeing more instances of misrepresentation where people have filed things on their own, or maybe they used an unauthorized agent or a consultant who said that this was fine and now it's not. And especially on one of the big ones recently has been unaccompanying spouses on express entry. And we talked about this recently as well. People are getting procedural fairness letters, and the number of misrep cases is climbing. And so it's huge. They're now doing thousands of misrep investigations.
yeah,
Yeah,
crazy world.
yeah, and as we speak about employers, Alicia, you wanted me to pull up this page from the OINP because that's what people ask a lot these days, and this is something that has recently changed. So maybe you can
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, and so many people, we've been getting lots of questions through the live. What's happening with OINP? Why have there been no draws until recently? What's going on with provincial nominations in Ontario? And so we know that Ontario rolled out a brand new system. And so there is a new way of employer-driven OINP applications to be filed. So basically, what has to happen through the new process, it all opened up on July 2nd, 2025. The employer, so if you go to OINP, you'll know that there are a number of different types of streams. If you are dealing with an employer-driven stream, then the employer actually has to go in and submit a job offer. So they have to list your knock and your wages, and they will have that job offer associated with your name. And then the candidate will get an email saying, here's your unique job offer ID. Now you've got 30 days to go in and create your EOI. You've got to create your expression of interest, and it's got to match, of course, what's been put in the job offer. And then only if you actually get a notification of interest back from Ontario, then the employer has to go in and create more details. So they've got to put in all sorts of other information. The web page kind of gives you a step-by-step what has to happen from the employer side. And then the employee only has 17 days. So the employer has 14 days to do their end of the deal in terms of putting in the job offer position for approval. And then the employee has to complete their side within 17 calendar days from that invitation in order for everything to move forward. And if none of those timeframes match up, or if the employer drops the ball, or the employee is traveling or on vacation, things will fall apart. So
Yeah.
keep in mind there's a brand new process.
Yeah. And then this is not the only recent change. Another recent change that we had is the increase in the settlement funds that you need to show for economic immigration programs. So as of July 7th, the numbers increased.
Yeah.
And we have several questions every live Q&A about, do I need to show funds? Do I not need to show funds? Do I need to show funds if I am drawn under PNP, and so on? So
Yeah.
perhaps one of you could share some insights about that as well.
Yeah, so what I've noticed is I've had a few clients who have retained us to help with their express entry review, and they've received emails from IRCC saying, hey, settlement funds are changing. Make sure you go into your account and update your settlement funds. And people are confused. Do you have to provide proof of settlement funds at this point? And no, if you just have an express entry profile, what you do need to do, though, is you need to go in and you need to, when it talks about how much money do you have to settle in Canada, that's where you need to update the number, because if you don't do that, then they will say that your profile is ineligible for federal skilled worker. So it really depends. If you're eligible under CEC, that might not be the end of the world, but if you want to maximize your chances and stay eligible under FSW, or if that's the only way that you're eligible, then make sure you've gone in and updated the settlement funds. You can't just make up that number. You have to actually have those increased funds. So that's where Igor, you had that table, depends on the number of family members. You have to include yourself, your spouse, any dependents. Make sure that you have that number and you can prove that you've had those settlement funds in your name accessible over and above your debt and liabilities for the last 6 months. Take a look at my article if you go back to the Holthe Immigration Law website. And this is relating back to when they changed those job offer points under LMIAs. So when they took away those job offer points, most people said, well, there's no point now having a job offer. But you'll notice in your express entry, so this is the
That's
article
that
Igor wrote, but
one.
if you keep going down that one, it's the updated one from March 2025 on can I claim job offer points. So maybe if you, or if you search job offer, right, sorry, you might have to search there it is.
Yeah,
It's
it's
on the
right
left. Yeah.
There we
So
go.
the reason that this is important is because of settlement funds. So if you still do have a job offer and you answer all those questions properly and appropriately given your situation, then you might be able to have a job offer not for the purposes of bonus points under express entry, but because you don't actually have to prove settlement funds. So you're still going to declare the number when you're doing your profile, but when you go to actually, if you get an ITA, submit your EAPR, you would not have to prove settlement funds if you can show that you meet the requirements under the ministerial instructions and the regulations for arranged employment points. So that's why that's there.
Okay. All right. So on this note, I propose that we move on to actually reviewing the comments that we've received from our viewers. I'll start with Frenchify. What a wonderful name. I have been following this channel.
Very fitting today.
Yeah. Exactly. Most helpful channel ever. Thank you so much. Gaurav says hello all from Nova Scotia. Isabella says hello. And then Tulipa says hello from Jamaica. We do have a ton of other people watching us from all over the world. But now we'll start answering some questions. So the first one will be from Han. How long does comprehensive security check take on average? Can I travel to other countries with a visa during this period?
Well, the first answer is that it depends. The security checks are all over the map. Some countries where there's more heightened security, we've seen candidates stuck for over a year waiting for those to go through, and in some cases even longer. So it really depends. If you're coming from a country like the US, for instance, where Canada has information sharing agreements, it's very, very rare that you're going to get stuck in any kind of a security check with those partner countries. But if you're coming from, say, Iran or China or one of these countries, then it's quite likely that there's going to be a little bit of a delay in getting those things approved. Can I travel to other countries with a visa? Yeah, if you have your valid visa, and when you're traveling, you're abiding by what you should be doing. In other words, not getting a DUI or something like that, a criminal charge or a conviction that would make you inadmissible to Canada. If you have your valid visas, your visa to board the plane, you've got your valid work permit or study permit, whatever status document you have in Canada, then having an application at the security check stage does not impact on your ability to travel in that regard, bearing everything else being okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on. So the next question would be from Frenchify. So Frenchify says, it's been 3 months since my French express entry dropped, but I still haven't got the medical biometrics request yet, while other people got those pretty quickly. So Frenchify now is confused, and how long should Frenchify wait before contacting RCC?
Want to tackle that one, Alicia?
Yeah, so the processing times are 6 months on average, right? And some people get their biometrics or medical requests early in the process, and some people, you won't see any traction for 4 months, and then all of a sudden you get a request for your biometrics, then you've got your request for your medical, and then they will process the application. So I wouldn't worry after 3 months, just because you don't have the medical or the biometrics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. I wanted to pull up this super chat from Isabella. So Isabella says, hello, I just got my TCF Canada results, but I'm not sure what is the certificate number that I should enter in the express entry profile. There's both candidate number and the attestation number, and the latter is too long, including the dashes.
And I know Mark and I did, I can't remember if it was a podcast or if it was in one of our
I
lives
think
where we actually pulled
it
this
was
up.
a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did one on French and we did one on properly being able to input your French scores. And it is a little bit confusing. I agree with you, Isabella. The key to figuring it out is when you're looking at entering your language scores, there's a little radio button. So it's a little kind of button that you can click, and it's not actually right next to where you would enter your French scores, where you'd think to look for it. You have to scroll up a little bit on the page and then click the radio button, and it'll tell you which of the digits after the dash you will be entering in. So that's where you've got to go. You've got to go back to your profile, scroll up, check the radio button, and then make sure to take the instructions from that radio button and then input it when you're going into your TCF results.
I'm trying to pull up
Yeah, I was going to, Igor, just to take a look. So
Adobe Acrobat. Okay, so this is the sample of the old TCF certificate. So this is the number that you have to enter.
Yeah, but it's too long, and so they tell you to only put in a portion of that
the
number,
back
and the
part.
instructions are in the radio button.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with that, I'll also point out that our Express Entry Accelerator course actually goes through that, and we talk about that in our in the module that we have specifically for language tests, lesson 57. So we walk through how to read the reports and the numbers that you need to choose. And it can trip you up. And you have to realize that when you make a mistake, if you get the wrong number written down, it can absolutely result in you getting your application returned as being incomplete. So, yeah. And tonight, I think it's tonight is our master class. At least in my calendar, it is. I don't know. It's been a while since we've done a master class. Maybe my calendar is off from our website, but yeah.
Okay.
Every 2 weeks, roughly, we do a new masterclass for subscribers to the Express Entry Accelerator course.
Okay. I'm not sure what this person is asking about. What is the best pathway for someone who did PSW in Ontario? I'm not exactly sure.
Personal support worker.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah. So
yeah.
RCIP, ONP, healthcare draw.
Well, at the end of the day, if it's the rural community or the OINP or whatever healthcare draw, you pursue every single thing that is available to you. There was a time where I would say that you were a pretty crappy immigration lawyer if you couldn't identify the best option for the client and then not waste everybody's time by doing multiple applications. Well, those days are long gone now, you guys. So because there's no guarantees with anything, and with the new powers that the minister is going to be getting here when the legislative changes come into play, there's no guarantee with anything, even if you're eligible. So if you have options through each of these pathways, you're going to pursue them all. There's no restriction at this stage on how many applications you can submit yourself under the economic programs. So I would pursue everything that you're available, that you're eligible for.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah, go ahead.
Igor, maybe now's a good time too. So we offer this live stream as a free, we're answering questions.
Yeah.
It's immigration information, but it's not immigration advice. But we do provide lots of immigration advice. And so, Prabhat, what I'd say is if you want some specific advice, Mark or Igor or I are happy to speak with you. You can roll over to our website, speak to a lawyer, you can book a consultation. These are paid consultations, and the reason is we need to get more information from you, and we go in a deep dive into your history and background and what your potential options are. And so this is where we are going to give you targeted immigration legal advice, but we need to know so much more about your education, your experience, your family situation before we can say, okay, I think you've got a good chance at this. Can you find an employer for this? Do you qualify for a healthcare draw? Are you meeting minimum eligibility for CEC or FSW? Let's talk about it in detail.
Yeah. And as we are answering the questions, more people pile in. Let me just make sure we don't have an overlap in comments. But Spider-Man, not a single live Q&A without Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Spider saying hello from the biggest city in the province of Quebec, as usual. Okay.
Trois-Rivières. Trois-Rivières.
And then Felix says hello again. And Andy says hello. And Malik says hello. And Isabella is thanking us for answering her question. You're welcome, Isabella. And Isabella actually sent one more super chat. So she says, I'm on a postgrad work permit without an ITA, and I'm renewing my passport. Will that affect my temporary resident status and the expiry date on my postgrad work permit? Will I need to notify RCC and have the postgrad replaced as well? Great question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this can be a big problem, Isabella, because the processing times are so long. And so one of the things is that you've got to make sure that you remain in the country. And if you are working and you're trying to get Canadian work experience points, then make sure that once you have your new passport, you have to make an application to change or extend the conditions on your PGWP to do a recapture of time. And if you look on the IRCC webpage, you can't extend your PGWP, but you can do a recapture of time if the only reason that they gave you a shorter duration on the first PGWP was because your passport was expiring. So if you were entitled to 3 years and you only got 2, you get your new passport, then you do this recapture of time application. Be super careful because you actually have to submit a paper application on your recapture of time, which is craziness. Almost nothing goes by paper. I had to help a client do it recently, and then IRCC said they couldn't find it, and now he started freaking out, so he had to resend the application. But you have to maintain your temporary status in the meantime. So that means you really can't leave Canada. You have to also sometimes ask for an updated visa if you do later intend to leave Canada, but it's super important that you have to get a new postgrad work permit. You can't just rely on the other one that will be expiring. You've got to do that application before the current PGWP expires, and then make sure that you get that new PGWP back so that you can prove with your employer that you still have the ability under maintained status to continue to work.
Okay.
And it's more important than ever before that you start that renewal process as early as possible. In the
Yeah.
past, sometimes we would be a little bit lax and we'd say, yeah, as long as you get it submitted within, a couple weeks of the expiry or so, the processing will be fine and you'll be able to benefit from maintained status. But with the uncertainty now of the whole maintained status world, how IRCC is cruelly, adjudicating these applications, um, you're far better off to look at the processing time, see where they're at right now, and at a minimum, maybe add on another week or two and then submit your application well in advance of your current one expiring. What do we got for processing times right now for in Canada extensions, Igor? Are we still around about the 180-day mark? I know it was up over 200, and then I saw it starting to creep down. It's like the stock market. I swear, it's
It's
yeah,
182.
sometimes what is it? 182? Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
it's
don't know. Like we submitted the PGWP recapture on the file that I was helping with in February, and there's still no decision. And they said, we don't have it, we lost it. So resent
Yeah.
the whole application, and we're still waiting.
And that is why you always make sure you send things by courier with a tracking number, and it's confirmation that it's been signed off on the receiving end by the government, so that if it does get lost, you can go back to them and say, hey, you guys lost it. It was delivered in your office. I want my application put back in the queue where it should have been had you not lost it.
Mm-hmm.
And so very important, and make a complete copy of the entire application with signatures and everything as proof, because sometimes they'll then ask you to send in that copy, and then they'll go from there. But yeah, it's disappointing because they are showing quite a cavalier approach to this when they're forcing people to go down these unique paths, in particular filing paper-based applications, which it's very rare.
Yeah. Isabella actually added just a little qualifier. So the postgrad was issued for the whole 3 years, and it's just renewing the passport because of the stained bio page.
Oh, well,
So if
book a
there's
consult, Isabella. Book a consult.
okay, so the next question would be from Prabhat. So what is the best pathway for someone who did this
I think
BMW?
we hit this
Okay,
one. Yeah, we
sorry.
covered this one. Yeah.
There was another one from the same person. Any
Yeah.
chance of the ONP skill in demand general draw? So we would pull up the
Sure.
large crystal ball.
Sure, there's a chance. The percentage of chance I would allocate to that is probably, in the near term, extremely low, until we see what happens maybe in 2026 if IRCC chooses to return some of the nominations that they pulled back from the provinces and increase their allocations. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So the next one would be from Nash. Nash heard that people were waiting for 3 months, 4 months for P1, P2 emails. So which is Portal 1, Portal 2, and e-copers. And this is this conspiracy theory that there's Portal 1, Portal 2, and those are the mandatory steps. Maybe delays are intentional to further restrict permanent residence. So what do you guys think about overall processing times?
Well, for express entry, we know they have service standards that they have to meet. They have agreed that they would process permanent resident applications within express entry in 6 months or under, at least 80% of them 6 months or under. And so when you have these standards, they will prioritize those applications. But for everything else, there's no real defined processing that they have to meet. And when you have annual levels plans and you say that you're going to take upwards of 100,000 less people as permanent residents in a given year, then the only tool they have to make sure they're staying on track of those metrics and not processing more than they have room for is to slow processing, which increases the processing time. So sure, it's possible that the delays are intentional, but when it comes to express entry, they really don't have a lot of room to not process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me pull up the next comment though. Lillian is asking, would you say an ECA for your bachelor's degree will increase the CRS scores? I'm thinking of getting an ECA for my bachelor's degree I did in my country, even though I currently have a master's degree from Ontario. Waste of money and time.
Yeah,
You only
you're not
assess
going
your
to get any
highest
points.
level of education. And
And
if
and the
that's a Canadian
reason
education at a higher level, then you will not get more points.
Yeah, and the reason maybe, Igor, you can pull up the selection grid scores, and so people can understand how many points do you get for education. So there's different points that are allocated for education. If you only have a bachelor's, and it also depends if you are a single principal applicant or if you have a spouse. So when we look at that point selection grid, you'll get a point for a bachelor's. If you actually are hitting the master's, and so this is where once we expand these, the points break down. And we go up to, yeah, the human capital factors, and we scroll down on this onto education. Um, under the education points, here we go. So if you are on your own, then you'll see that, okay, you're going to get a bachelor's degree is going to give you 120 points. And if you're with a spouse, it's 112. If you have 2 or more certificates, so let's say you wanted to get points for your bachelor's degree plus a 1 or 2 year program, then this is where you are looking at maybe can you hit this next bandwidth, right? You've got 2 or more certificates, degrees, or diplomas, one of which is for a program of at least 3 years. Then that might make a difference. Then it might be worth going to get your ECA for your bachelor's. But take a look, if you have your master's already, then you're already getting more points than if you had a bachelor's plus another certificate program. So this is why Igor is saying it's a waste of money, because if you already have your master's and it's for sure a master's, and make sure it is a full master's program and it's 2 years and it's meets the requirements for a full master's, then you'd be claiming the higher level master's points.
Mm-hmm. Okay. As we speak about the ECAs, this question would be relevant. So, do ECAs expire? If my ECA was issued more than 2 years ago, can I still use it for express entry?
Yep, they do. So take a look, your education credential assessment, when you go into the section on obtain the right documents in your IRCC Express Entry page, it says those ECAs are valid for 5 years. So keep in mind that they do expire, but it's a 5-year period.
Okay. Perfect. So the next one would be from, let's see.
All stuff covered in the masterclass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the Express Entry Accelerator. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one would be from Inshal. I will be studying at the University of Windsor, Master in Civil Engineering. What will be the best path for me to get a permanent resident?
Ding.
Yeah, step 1, you reach out for a consultation so that we know exactly your situation.
Yeah.
And that would be the best start of this pathway towards permanent residence.
Yeah.
Okay, to leap us.
It's and understand, like if you go back to that one too, Igor, like you have to understand that when it comes to permanent residence and you're an international student, work is what drives the ship. So if you're going through the process of trying to determine what my options are, it always starts with the work experience that you have, because that is what drives the ship for economic PR programs. So yeah. So where are you going to work? Do you have work before you came to Canada in addition to your education? And then how old are you? You know, all of these factors, your human capital play a role.
Yeah. Okay. So, oops, sorry, I'll switch the layout. So Talipa's saying my friend's work permit expires in August 2025. Do you think applying for a visitor visa will buy them more time in Canada?
Alicia, you want to tackle that one to start with?
No, I don't think it'll buy them more time in Canada. I don't think there's any point to buying them more time in Canada unless they have already submitted a permanent residence application, and it's really important that they maintain their status as a visitor, but most applications require you to maintain your status and ability to work. So it is very important that people comply with their immigration conditions, one of which is that you will go home by the end of your authorized period of stay. So, Tulipa, I really encourage your friend to reach out and please book a consult because we need to know more before we can give advice. But in general, people are not doing themselves favors by staying and using up all their personal savings and just sitting here as a visitor in Canada because you can't work. And if you work, it's unauthorized work and you've breached your immigration requirements. And so it is important that you maintain your best possibility to get PR. And sometimes that means going back to your home country and accumulating your foreign work experience. If you haven't maxed out your 3 years of foreign work experience, that might make more of a difference in terms of your express entry points than sitting here and hoping for something to change in immigration. It really depends on what their CRS score is and what their options are, how much work history do they have, how much education do they have, how old are they? These are all things we'd need to know more about.
Yeah.
Okay. So Isabella sends one more super chat. So
Back
Isabella
at it
is a
again
super
here.
chat rock star today. So Isabella says, I changed my legal name back home when I was 1 year old. Will I need to state that in the express entry application? And if so, what document should I submit? Absolutely. Absolutely. It asks, have you ever changed or used any other names? So, Mark, have you dealt with any clients who change their names, and what would you typically submit?
Yeah. So the one beautiful thing I love about express entry is that it is predictable. So if you do things correctly, if you answer the questions properly, if you upload the necessary documents, your application will be approved. They don't have a lot of discretion to refuse just because they don't like you. But the reality is, if you do exactly what they ask, then there's like 100% degree of certainty it's going to be approved. And in this case, they want evidence of what your name was before, and then the name change. In some cases, there are formalities that exist within different countries, and so if there's a process that's typically required that you go through, like posting in the local paper or something like that, to show the name change, then we always include that. Often we see this with individuals who maybe have a maiden name. They've changed their name when they were married, and so we'll include, any documentation, the original birth certificate or a passport that had the previous maiden name, and then the new passport will include that. But that's typically how you address it, and it's entirely, yeah. I guess it's if you submit the proper documentation, there's no issues with this at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question would be from Tanya. So, if the police certificate was obtained 1 or 2 months before receiving the ITA, is it still valid or should we get a new one?
Another question covered in the course for sure.
Yeah.
Want to tackle that, Alicia?
Yeah, maybe Igor, you can pull up the express entry page on police certificates. So Tanya, it really depends on whether this is for the country you are currently living in or for a previous country of residence where you have been residing there for 6 months or longer. So be really careful with police certificates. In general, my policy is, if in doubt, get an updated police certificate. But if you are absolutely sure that it's still valid, you haven't traveled back to that country since the police certificate was issued, then you can usually use it. They do have rules about sometimes countries put an expiry date on that police certificate, but as long as it meets immigration's requirements, then it should be okay. So take a look at the IRCC page on police certificates. And in general, if in doubt, make sure to get an updated police certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. This one is a little sketchy. So Nana says, in my previous application, I didn't mention that I was illegal in Korea. I did not submit a criminal record. While applying for permanent residence, do I need to mention that in my PR application?
You
Yep.
need to book a consult, Nana.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to touch this one with a 10-foot pole. We need more detail so we can understand exactly what's happening. Yeah, but understand you're never going to misrepresent anything. You're going to answer all the questions that are asked. There isn't necessarily a need to volunteer information unless that omission could then be considered a misrepresentation. So,
And you're going to need to disclose all of your address history and all of your personal history. And so when you disclose that, and if you were in Korea for more than 6 months, then the system's going to ask you for a police certificate. And then you're going to have to also answer your statutory declaration questions. And one of which is, have you ever remained without authorization or been denied a visa in any country? So those are all questions you're going to have to answer truthfully.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next one would be from Jimmy. Is it possible for the government to tweak their immigration targets? It's one of those, is it possible? It is possible.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and
the
it's
way,
highly likely. Okay, I'll say this. A number of years ago, they only did 1-year plans, and then they decided, you know what, we're going to announce 3-year plans. And I have not seen a 3-year plan in the last 4 years that wasn't adjusted every year, notwithstanding. So, for instance, before this year, the annual levels plans that were released in 2023 suggested targets of 500,000 or more overall landings or permanent residents for the year 2024. And then and they're rolling 3-year rolling periods, and for 2025, 2026, and then in 2024 that all changed and they significantly cut back the numbers, notwithstanding the previously announced 3-year levels plans. So is it possible that the 2026 2027 targets could go back up? Yeah, it is possible. We just or that, for instance, they change the PNP allocation and return all of those 50% of the nominations that were pulled for 2025, maybe 2026, they return them, which I think is everybody would love to see. But the government, they have a mandate and they are able to decide whatever they want to do, including keeping insurance adjusters or whatever on the specific, STEM category based draws.
okay, so the next one would be, again, going back to the same topic of police certificates. I just moved back home. Do I need a new police certificate? Same answer, right? Typically, the police certificate is valid for 6 months.
Yeah.
But if you obtained it less than 6 months ago, and then you return, then typically that would not be an issue. But still, we always try to submit the newest police certificate. The fresher it is, the better.
Yeah.
But if you obtained it more than 6 months ago and then you return back, then it's a big problem. Then you don't even want to submit.
Yeah. And the thing I like about the course when it comes to police certificates is that we're constantly getting updated police certificates for our database from our students that are taking it. So we have in the lesson devoted specifically to police clearance certificates, we have a great, group of sample documents that are redacted that give you an idea if what you've got is similar to that, at least an idea of what it used to look like. Now it can always change, but yeah, that lesson is entirely focused on police certificates, and we have an individual lesson for every single document with a video explaining and sample documents where possible and instructions. So my favorite for sure is the record of employment section, where we've got all of our good stuff for trying to strengthen one of the most important parts of the whole express entry journey, which is proving work history.
Yeah. And so the same would go for Mancha.
We've got samples of those in there. Yep.
So
yeah, we do.
Give deeds, yes, they are acceptable, but there are certain requirements to give deeds.
Yeah.
And again, it really comes down to how you, as an applicant, convince the officer that it's not just some kind of like temporary arrangement. You borrow the money from someone, you show that money, and then you return the money back. And that you completely disregard the gift deed. It's kind of like this cover for you trying to show that you have funds.
And maybe, Igor, too, we can direct people to the podcast, because we did a whole Express Entry series on getting it right on proof of funds. So take a look at that.
We did. Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the things I know I cover in the course is just some of the realities around funds. If you're saying that your good buddy gave you a gift deed of $35,000 or whatever for you and your family of 7 to land in Canada, well, an officer's probably going to question whether or not that's truly a gift. And so the common mantra that I use is that friends loan money, family gives money. And so I'm not saying that it's not possible that you could have a friend that truly gave you the money, but you're going to have an uphill battle. And we try to stay as far away from any officer discretion as possible within the work we do for our clients who hire us to help them with their express entry applications, as much as the students within the course and what we're teaching you right here.
Joe sends us a comment that he's late for the stream.
Great to catch
How's
the
your French
trifecta.
going,
Nice.
Joe? How's your French?
Yeah, how's French going, Joe? We know you're studying. Do it, man. Do it.
We know our viewers by names now. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yasir is a little anxious with the wait time. So Yasir is waiting for 8 months and still in info sharing stage for an express entry PMP.
Yeah, it depends on the country, right? Some countries take a little bit longer, and it just is what it is. You would like to see that all express entry applications would just be processed. And I think when he says express PNP, I think it's an express entry stream. Once that nomination comes, 6 months is the goal, but they do say 80% we will hit, try to hit the 6-month mark. And I think they're probably posting around 5 months generally right now. So,
Okay. We have a super chat from Andy. Any comments
Andy.
or best practices about the process of restoration of status for applicants with refused work permits in Canada after the recent changes about having several applications in process?
Yeah, it's a disaster, Andy, because all of these, like I called these work permit extensions frivolous ones. I think some other terms used for them are like dummy ones, or I can't remember the other terminology. But effectively, it's just the act of filing an extension application when your current permit's expiring just to benefit from maintained status until a decision is made. Well, sometimes in that process, and we've covered this, I think, did we do a maintained status? At some point, I think we talked about this, either one of our podcast episodes or a live stream. But the problem is, what do you do when your employer magically comes up with an LMIA and you filed one of these goofy little extensions, frivolous extensions, knowing it's not going to get approved, and then you try to file a new application with the proper LMIA? Well, what does that mean? Well, it can mean it's a disaster. And if a work permit is rejected, the first one, there are some really convoluted rules on how they treat the second application. And for all intents and purposes, if it has been 90 days past the expiry of the original work permit that had the last valid status for the applicant, if it's been 90 days past and the original work permit is rejected, the second one trying to restore, you're gonna have issues. You have to pay close attention to the instructions you get on that first one. If they give you 90 days, then great, away you go. But often they can be kind of mean on these. So yeah, it's just a mess, Andy. So I always take the lead off of whatever the refusal letter says and kind of work through that. But if you get a work permit refused, you do have the ability to restore status. But if you filed one that was kind of midstream, like a second one while you were still on maintained status, that can be an issue.
Yeah. Grav is asking, is the score the only criteria that increases your chances of getting a nomination? Or at a time, targeted selection of applicants? And so Grav is in the expression of interest pool of candidates, and the score is 59. So this is a very painful question.
So Gaurav, take a look at some of the podcasts and the issues we've done on the AAIP. So AAIP they can pull whatever they want. They can use whatever constellation of factors to kind of pick and choose from within the pool of candidates to issue a notification of interest to a certain round. Hi, Simba. So The answer is no. The score is not the only criteria. They can look at your score, they can look at people who have job offers, they can look at a particular stream like rural renewal and just do invitations for rural renewal for people that have this knock who have over this score with a job offer. They can choose what kind of way that they want to combine factors in order to do those rounds. And I think it was Nash who pointed out they used to publish what they put in each of those rounds and what their factors were, and now they've stopped doing that. So again, Alberta's a bit of a black box.
Mysterious.
Yeah. Aries asking a good question. I think we've answered this question in one of our previous live Q&As. If my husband started an H&C application and we are his dependents, can I try to apply being the main applicant through Express Entry? I got CLB 7 and may sponsor my husband and children. The short answer, yes, and everyone can submit an application. The H&C doesn't bar you from submitting another application under any other stream. So,
yeah, the real question, Ari, is there's lots of moving parts here. I'd say book a consult because there's clearly a bunch of backstory going on and different applications that have already been filed. And we would be interested in knowing what's your possible CRS score. Are you properly calculating your CRS score? Is there a reason that your spouse could be inadmissible if there was a previous refugee claim or if there was some sort of immigration violation? Like, why are they making that H&C application? What other things have they tried in the past? But in general, as long as there's no inadmissibility of your spouse that could make you inadmissible, so that's also something to check. As long as you're eligible to create a profile, you can, but you might just not have a good chance at getting an ITA depending on what your CRS score is.
And another thing that I would want to raise here is when you submit an H&C application, it's really important to show that you don't qualify for any other program, or at least the likelihood of you getting an ITA is close to zero. Because we've seen a ton of refusals on H&C applications where the officer says, yes, this person submits an H&C application, maybe the factors exist, but this person is also eligible to come to Canada as a spouse or as an economic immigrant, and they would refuse the application just based on that. So absolutely, Ari, if you have this situation that you're finding yourself in, just consider booking a consult. Umar is saying, I'm stuck in a comprehensive security checks for 12 months, and the acknowledgement of receipt was sent 16 months ago. So what should I do? So this perhaps is the question that prompts us to talk about mandamus as an option. And we see a lot of people are stuck in processing for a year and a half, 2 years. For some of them, we actually file mandamus applications. We file letters of demand, and now the process has changed a lot as well. Now that the court said, if you file a mandamus application, there is no reason, so you don't have to wait for Rule 9 reasons. There is less time to negotiate, and when you file an application for leave and judicial review, you have to be mentally prepared to file an application record as well, and so that makes mandamus application a little bit less affordable for people because not everyone is ready to pay for the whole process, for most of the process up front. What is your feedback and your experience dealing with clients on the consults? How many of them experience such egregious delays? And is this something normal? Is this something that should be still considered on a case-by-case basis, or everyone should go and file mandamus applications?
Yeah. For me, the big thing is what country, right? Why is it getting stuck? So if you're saying, well, I'm coming from China and my application has been stuck for 11 months in security, screening, I want to file a mandamus application. Well, sometimes it's a little bit easier for the government to say, hey, we've received instructions from our boss, the cabinet, to do heightened security screening on the vast majority of applicants from China. And so you are not being singled out, my friend. You're just one of every Chinese national that has heightened security screening. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case, but you're going to have a harder case to meet than someone who is, say, from a country where there is no real reason for the backlog. Let's say they're coming from the US and, it's stuck in security screening, or or the processing of the application is just dragged on. Because we know there's been a history of, we've talked about IRCC losing paper-based applications. Well, there's been a history within IRCC of applications being assigned to dummy numbers that are not associated with an actual officer that's still working for IRCC. So there are very legitimate reasons for the use of mandamus. And, in some cases, it's the only way that we can really get a just result for a client that is stuck in limbo and they're trying to move forward with their life. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. The next one would be from Malik, and we're running short on time, so we'll try to answer the remaining questions as fast as we can. But long story short, Malik is asking if he applied for a work permit extension with a new LMIA, can he still count the work experience that he obtained on a maintained status?
So, Malik, the rule is that if you are working and you had a valid status under that LMIA-based work permit and you are authorized to work, then for sure you can claim up until that period of time. If before your work permit expired, and it says after expiration on work permit, I applied for an extension. So if you applied after your work permit expired, you would not have maintained status. But if you applied before your LMIA-based work permit expired and you asked for interim authorization to work, then you should have status. But if you are correct in saying after that first LMIA work permit expired, you applied for an extension, it's no longer an extension, it's just a new application. And I would be worried about what is your status, right? So, after when your work permit first expires, you normally need to change conditions to a visitor or you need to leave the country. And if you didn't do that, you might be an overstay. If in the meantime you have a new employer or maybe the same employer and they got a new LMIA, then when you submit that new application, you're not usually authorized to submit an inside Canada application if you don't already have work permit status unless you do a restoration application. So there's a number of things that there are big red sirens going off about because sounds like there's a few problems here with what happened in how you filed applications, and you might have some problems with your status. Maybe you left, maybe you filed an outside Canada application. I don't know, but definitely this is one that I'd say book a consult.
Okay, and somewhat related question from this viewer. Someone I talked to finished school in April 2024, and they still have a valid study permit. And they continued working full-time and applied for postgrad work permit in September. Would it affect permanent residence application?
Yeah.
So this is unauthorized work, right? So take a look at the regulations. Also take a look at the blog articles that I wrote. So if you go to our Holthe Law immigration page, I wrote a whole article on can students be working after the end of studies? And in general, no, because what happens is the regulation actually says that your study permit comes to an end after the period that you've completed your studies. So when you've completed your studies, you're no longer an active student and you can no longer benefit from the ability to work off campus as a full-time student, right? So the only way that students can work, unless they have a separate work permit, a co-op work permit, is that they are a full-time student. And when you've completed your studies, you're no longer a full-time student. Therefore, you're not allowed to work under those provisions that says that you're not authorized to work. So it's pretty old, Igor, but if you go through students and if you check work after studies completion, that all that legislation is still correct. And you can go also to the IRCC page on study permit conditions, but it definitely sounds, that's the article. You must stop working as soon as you get your letter of completion from your school. So either it is going to be when you get a letter, when you get your transcripts, when you get your degree or diploma, or you walk the stage and you actually go through your graduation ceremony, the earliest of any of those things. So IRCC literally says your ability to work as a student stops the instant that one of those things happens, the first time you're notified of completion of studies, you are not authorized. So your friend would not have been authorized to work, and it would have been illegal work, unauthorized work. And then the problem is that if they didn't disclose that or declare that in their postgrad work permit, then that could be misrep. And then also they can't rely on that work experience for Canadian experience points. So they have to disclose it as unauthorized work, and they can't count it because you can only start to count work for high skilled Canadian work experience the day you actually submit your PGWP application.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
All
Henry's
right.
asking, is there a way to get urgent processing for outland spousal sponsorship application because of pregnancy, medicals are passed?
Yeah. Not really. I've never had success doing that or trying or requesting it.
I mean, you can request it, you can put in humanitarian and compassionate factors, you can do a web form, you can provide doctor's letters, but just like Mark said, I haven't tried it recently and I've not seen it being successful, but it is theoretically possible.
Perhaps one solution that can be adopted in this situation would be to apply for a TRV and have that spouse come to Canada. But again, it's questionable whether that application will be approved faster than you'll get a decision on the spousal.
And maybe, Igor, I see videos ask the question a number of times and we're on spousals, so maybe we can turn to the financial evaluation form. So the IMM 1283, if you go to if you just search IMM 1283 and it goes into the financial evaluation form, and if you show the instructions, it talks about the instructions. But in general, if you are sponsoring a legally married spouse, normally you don't need to include the IMM 1283 unless the spouse that you're sponsoring has a dependent child who has a dependent child. So literally your spouse has to have a grandchild that is part of that application. So take a look at this. This is where you're going to look for who needs to submit this financial evaluation form, the 1283. And so you just expand. That's how you find those instructions. You just click on the blue box.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Right.
Okay. Abdul is asking, do you need to provide reference letter for all work experience in express entry application?
Another great one covered in the course. So the key for express entry is that you're going to provide information within the profile in the work history section, the study history, that you're claiming points for. So you do not need to waste everyone's time by listing every single piece of work that you've ever done in your life for the past 10 years in the work history. If you do that, the system will then by default request a reference letter for everything you've put in there. So you only need in the work history section to include a reference letter to support the work you need in that work history section. You only need to include work and provide a reference letter for work that you want to claim points for. But that doesn't mean you don't list the other work history. It's just not in the work history section. After you get your ITA, it'll create a personal history section, and then you're going to make sure that everything you've done is all listed in that section. And the same thing goes for study history.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a couple of more questions. Joey Star says, I took a loan 2 months before an ITA for personal purposes, but Joey also had sufficient funds for proof of funds, and now he's wondering whether the loan can be a factor for rejection.
I don't, Alicia, you want to
So,
take a crack?
okay, so all right, Joey, first of all, it depends on whether you're qualifying under CEC or FSW. So if you got an ITA under CEC, then you should not need to provide settlement funds. So that's the first thing to check. Go back, look at your ITA. Were you invited under CEC? If you were invited under CEC, good news is you don't need to provide settlement funds. It says so right in the instructions when you're looking at the express entry instructions. So That's one thing. If for some reason you are invited under FSW, then you may need to provide settlement funds if you don't have an offer of arranged employment. When you're looking at settlement funds, then normally you have to see, did you have those settlement funds that you claimed, whatever you put in your profile, over and above your debts and liabilities? And so you might need to do quite a bit of work and spreadsheets and documentation to prove you still had sufficient funds that still met that settlement fund requirement over and above your debts and liabilities. But if by taking that loan, you basically did not still have a clear amount of net assets, then you might be in a difficult position.
Okay. We have about 5 questions left before we will wrap this up. MakeNet system is asking, I am a worker applying for a study permit for my minor child. Is the letter of acceptance a required document for a study permit application?
For minor children, I've had situations where I've seen a refusal where you didn't provide it. I've seen other situations where they've not had an issue with minor children requiring a letter from the school. So what does that tell me? Well, if there's one officer at one point in time that requested the letter, I usually try to get it. And then I eliminate the hassle or worry about it. But it's possible it could be approved without it. But I just personally, I don't like to take chances unless it's, there's no option. Because sometimes you don't have a school lined up yet, right, for the child.
Yeah. Keep in mind too, if the minor child is already in Canada, then they might be authorized to study without a study permit, but we always recommend that people do get that study permit for a number of reasons with maintained status, which can affect the parents, and also so that they have a document so they can prove to their school system, also for healthcare purposes. But if you are at a primary or a secondary or a high school, then all of those are designated learning institutions, but you should get a letter from the school that says, yes, my child's enrolled, or we will accept this child for enrollment.
Yeah, and another reason why we always recommend that even if your child can study on a visitor record, that you apply for the study permit is because if you leave Canada, that visitor record turns into a pumpkin, and it's of no use whatsoever. Yep. Okay. One more question from Alex. Do you think we'll have any French draw? So I'm pulling up my imaginary crystal ball.
In the near future, sure, I'll go with yes. We're overdue.
Yeah. Okay. Rahul's asking for 72-year-old female applicants who submitted an agency application. Is it necessary to add a PCC police clearance certificate before submission? Or can I first submit an agency application and then add a PCC later?
It's all about completeness, and you need to have a PCC when you're filing an H&C. So
unless
I include it.
Exemption specifically.
Yeah.
So Rahul, follow the document checklist, right?
Yeah. Okay. Tromsanka is asking, for someone outside Canada with the French CLV5, that the person qualified to apply for the work visa, which I mean is Francophone Mobility Work Permit, without needing an LMA, or this is only available to people currently inside Canada?
Okay, so
go for it.
So for Francophone mobility, not only do you have to have your NCLC level 5s, you also have to have a job offer from a Canadian employer outside the province of Quebec. So the employer actually has to go and do what's called an employer portal offer. So this is exempt from needing the LMIA, but they do have to have an employer account. They have to file that employer portal offer. They have to pay a $230 compliance fee to the Government of Canada, and they get back an O number, so a receipt number for that $230 compliance fee, and they also get an A number. And that A number is what the applicant needs to try to then apply for the work permit. So when you apply for that work permit, you can do so from outside of Canada. You've got to show your French language results. You've got to show that you meet eligibility for the job that they're offering you. And you definitely need that A number from the employer, proving that they submitted that offer of employment under Francophone Mobilité.
Okay. And then we have the last 2 questions that I selected for this live Q&A. Shane asks, I'm applying for permanent residence under CC. I have a business outside Canada, so can I use that as my foreign work experience, while I was working full-time inside Canada. So the business is outside the country, person is inside the country, working full-time. Can that foreign work experience be counted? Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I've got my little friend here who's helping with my audio, so you guys can hear me now, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I
also heard
paused
wah,
and
wah,
left
wah,
that
wah.
sound deliberately.
he said, is it still work? Is it still doing that, or is it done?
No, it just did it once.
Okay, yeah, this is my helper here who's desperately wanting to come down. Okay, let's just deal with it. He obviously, come on, let's go. There we go. He runs the house here, so there we go. Short-lived visit for me. Nothing like disruption in the live stream. Oh, all right. This question here, as far as business outside Canada, the real question is, can you double up? And the answer is you can't. So if you're hitting 30 hours a week with your work experience in Canada, and you're also trying to claim at the same time work experience outside, even if it's part-time or casual, 30 hours is 30 hours. Now, one client asked, well, can we designate which one we want? So if we already have 1 year of Canadian work experience, and I'm still working for the company, can I then say, well, okay, listen, I don't want you to count that work experience. I want to count the foreign part-time work experience for this period of time. And the answer should be yes, but you would have to structure it very carefully in your work history section. In fact, I said you'd have to put an end date on the Canadian work experience within the work history section, and then only have the foreign work experience listed. Understanding that there's very heightened expectations of trying to prove that foreign work experience when you're already working full time. So it is possible, but you can't double dip.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, in your personal history section, you're going to list it all, showing that you were doing both at the same time, and letter of explanation to explain why you wanted things set up the way it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And the last question that we have for today would be from Zach. So for misrepresentation, does RCC look at a specific time frame? In Quebec, for example, if 5 years passed after any misrep or any breaking of temporary condition, it is forgotten. Anything the same about RCC?
No, it's forever. They get to look as long as they want.
Mm-hmm. We've dealt with a client who forgot to include her work experience in one of the applications that was submitted years and years ago, and RCC dug those up and issued a PFL saying, we don't believe that you worked in that occupation just because, remember 5 applications ago you didn't mention that on your form. So they can take a look at everything, and that's what they do.
It's hard for me not to think of the officers just sitting behind their desks in their little team saying, "Ha! I got another one. Yeah, misrep. What's your quota for today? We've got 25. Oh, we're at 24. Oh, come on, guys, find one more. That's hard not to feel that's what's happening on the other side. Yeah.
Scavenge hunt.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So on this note, we will be ending this live Q&A, and we will see you again next week at the same time on Wednesday. Just a reminder to everyone, we do our bi-weekly master classes for Expert Entry course. We provide consultations. So if you have a specific question that you would want to discuss, or your question starts with can I, should I, have I, will I, all of those questions should be addressed at the consult, because before we can answer this question, we need to know a little bit more about you. You probably would not want to hear our advice based on just a limited set of factors that we know. Okay. Any last comments, Mark, Alicia, before we wrap this up?
Hang in there.
Question. Yeah, Dilpreet saying, make sure you book a consult, right? This is something that is so specific, and there's a lot of red flags that you got to book a consult. We definitely cannot answer that on the live stream.